Tommy Reeves had been pumping gas at Desert Rose Station in Barstow, California for 12 years, and every trucker, local, and highway traveler thought they knew him perfectly. What they didn't know was that before he was checking tire pressure and restocking energy drinks, he had been Colonel Thomas Phantom Reeves, the most decorated stealth pilot in Air Force history. If only they knew that the quiet man who smiled and asked regular or premium had once flown missions so classified that 3 presidents still didn't know they'd happened. The gas station sat like a forgotten monument on the edge of the Mojave Desert, where Interstate 15 carved a lonely path between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. Desert Rose Station had been there since 1967, according to the faded sign that creaked in the constant wind. The building was sun-bleached concrete and rust-stained metal, with 2 ancient pumps that Tommy maintained with an obsessive precision. That seemed excessive for equipment most people assumed barely functioned. But those pumps never broke down, never gave incorrect readings, and somehow always dispensed fuel faster than newer stations down the highway. Tommy was 54 but moved with the controlled efficiency of someone much younger. His salt and pepper hair was always neatly trimmed in a style that hadn't changed in decades, and his blue eyes held a sharpness that made people think twice before trying to shortchange him or cause trouble. He wore the same uniform every day, pressed blue work shirt with Tommy embroidered over the pocket, dark jeans without a wrinkle, and black boots that maintained a military shine despite walking on oil-stained asphalt for over a decade. Around his neck hung a simple silver chain that disappeared beneath his collar, and on his right hand was a class ring from the Air Force Academy that he never mentioned and most people never noticed. The desert wind carried stories across the empty landscape, and if you knew how to listen, you could hear things that weren't meant for civilian ears. Every morning at exactly 0530 hours, though Tommy would have said 5:30 if anyone asked, a sound drifted across the desert from the direction of Edwards Air Force Base, 40 miles northeast. It was the distant thunder of experimental aircraft pushing the boundaries of what was possible, engines that existed in development programs with budgets larger than most countries' defense spending. Tommy would pause whatever he was doing when those sounds reached Desert Rose Station, his head tilted slightly toward the horizon like he was reading a language written in jet exhaust and afterburner flames. The local residents had their theories about Tommy Reeves, the way small communities always develop folklore around anyone who doesn't fit their expectations perfectly. Martha Sullivan, who ran the diner across the street, insisted he'd been in the military, based on the way he stood when the flag was raised at the elementary school down the road. Bill Patterson from the auto parts store next door swore Tommy knew more about aircraft engines than anyone had a right to know, pointing to the way he'd correctly diagnosed problems with Bill's nephew's Cessna just by listening to it fly overhead. Old Pete Martinez, who'd been pumping gas at stations throughout the Southwest since the 1970s, claimed Tommy maintained those ancient pumps with techniques that seemed more like military protocols than standard service procedures. But Tommy answered only what needed answering, maintaining a careful distance that said this far and no further without ever being rude or unfriendly. He knew every regular customer's name, remembered their usual orders, and could diagnose car problems with an accuracy that bordered on supernatural. When Sarah Chun brought her overheating Honda Civic to the station on a blazing Tuesday afternoon, Tommy had identified a failing water pump before she'd even explained the symptoms. When the Hendricks family's RV developed electrical problems during their cross-country vacation, Tommy had them back on the road in 20 minutes with repairs that a dealership would have taken 3 days to complete. The truth was hidden in plain sight, scattered across the station like pieces of a puzzle that no one thought to assemble. The way Tommy's eyes automatically tracked aircraft crossing the desert sky, identifying them by sound before they became visible, how he maintained the station's aging radio equipment with a precision that allowed him to monitor emergency frequencies across 3 states. The fact that his small apartment above the station contained books on advanced aerodynamics, atmospheric physics, and flight dynamics that would have challenged graduate students at MIT. And most telling of all, the way his hands moved when he thought no one was watching, fingers unconsciously working through control sequences on invisible instruments, muscle memory from a cockpit that existed in a world of classified missions and national security clearances. Behind the station, hidden beneath a weathered tarp that most people assumed covered broken equipment, was a motorcycle that didn't match anything in civilian production catalogs. The machine was sleek black metal and advanced electronics, built for speed and stealth, in ways that suggested military applications. Tommy rode it on desert highways during the early morning hours before the station opened, when the roads were empty and the sky was painted in colors that reminded him of dawns over places whose names couldn't be spoken aloud. At those speeds, with the desert wind cutting through his helmet and the horizon stretching endless ahead, Tommy Reeves could almost forget that he was supposed to be invisible. The gas station security system was another piece of the puzzle, though no one realized it wasn't quite standard equipment. Cameras provided coverage that extended far beyond the property boundaries. Motion sensors detected movement patterns that would interest national security agencies, and communication equipment maintained encrypted connections to networks that civilians weren't supposed to know existed. Tommy had installed and maintained everything himself, explaining to anyone who asked that desert locations required extra precautions against theft and vandalism. What he didn't mention was that the system was capable of detecting incoming aircraft at ranges that would make air traffic controllers envious, or that it automatically recorded and analyzed electromagnetic signatures in ways that could identify classified military hardware. The inconsistency started small, the kind of details that nagged at observant minds without quite forming coherent suspicions. When lightning struck the power lines during a summer storm and knocked out electricity across 3 counties, Desert Rose Station somehow maintained full power while the rest of Barstow sat in darkness. Tommy explained it as a backup generator system, but the humming that emerged from beneath the building sounded nothing like standard diesel equipment. The electrical output was too clean, too stable, and far too powerful for any generator that should have fit in the station's cramped utility spaces. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, an aerospace engineer traveling between Lockheed facilities, had stopped for gas on a Tuesday afternoon when she noticed Tommy's hands. As he cleaned her windshield, his fingers moved in precise sequences that she recognized from her own work with flight control systems. The movements were unconscious, automatic, like someone whose muscle memory was calibrated to instruments that required split-second precision at 30,000 feet. When she mentioned she worked in aviation, Tommy's response was polite but carefully neutral, the kind of non-committal acknowledgement that suggested deeper knowledge being deliberately concealed. The station's maintenance schedules followed patterns that seemed excessive for a simple fuel stop. Every piece of equipment was serviced with military precision, checked and rechecked according to protocols that would have impressed Air Force ground crews. Tommy's tools were arranged with obsessive order, each instrument in its designated place, and his diagnostic procedures followed methodologies that suggested training far beyond civilian automotive repair. When Jake Morrison, a retired Navy mechanic, complimented Tommy on his organizational skills, he'd gotten a brief smile and a comment about old habits. That raised more questions than it answered. Local pilots began noticing anomalies in their radio communications when passing near Desert Rose Station. Flight instructor Carol Yu reported static patterns that seemed almost like encrypted transmissions, brief bursts of interference that her instruments couldn't quite decode. Commercial airline captain David Park mentioned to his dispatcher that the area around Barstow generated radio signatures unlike anything in standard aviation databases. Military cargo flights from Edwards occasionally deviated slightly from their filed flight plans when passing overhead. subtle course corrections that air traffic controllers attributed to routine navigation adjustments, but which formed patterns that suggested someone on the ground was providing information not available through official channels. Tommy's knowledge of current aviation technology extended far beyond what any civilian should possess. When aerospace contractor Linda Foster stopped for fuel while driving between classified facilities, she'd mentioned problems with new stealth coding applications that were supposed to be restricted information. Tommy had offered suggestions about atmospheric interference patterns and radar absorption coefficients that demonstrated familiarity with cutting-edge research. His comments were casual, almost offhand, but revealed understanding of material science and electronic warfare principles that existed only in the most advanced military programs. The physical evidence was scattered throughout the station, like breadcrumbs leading to a truth no one was looking for. Tommy's personal vehicle, a nondescript pickup truck, contained navigation equipment that could calculate three-dimensional flight paths and atmospheric variables. His office held weather monitoring instruments capable of predicting wind shear and thermal patterns with accuracy that would have served military flight operations. The station's computer system, supposedly used only for inventory and credit card transactions, processed data with encryption protocols and processing power that suggested connections to networks far beyond commercial fuel sales. Weather patterns around Desert Rose Station behaved in ways that local meteorologists found difficult to explain. Atmospheric readings from the area occasionally showed electromagnetic anomalies that didn't match any known natural phenomena or civilian electronic equipment. Temperature and pressure measurements suggested heat sources that operated on schedules unrelated to normal station activities. Wind direction sensors detected air movement patterns that implied aircraft operations in areas where no flights were officially recorded. Tommy's sleep schedule revealed another layer of mystery to anyone paying close attention. Martha Sullivan from the diner noticed that his apartment lights followed patterns that suggested he was monitoring something during the overnight hours when civilian air traffic was minimal. His movements around the station property during pre-dawn hours seemed purposeful rather than random, like someone conducting systematic inspections or maintaining equipment that required constant attention. The fact that he always knew exactly when military aircraft would pass overhead, often commenting on flight schedules before the planes became visible, suggested access to information that civilian gas station attendants weren't supposed to possess. Most telling inconsistency was Tommy's reaction to unexpected situations that required quick thinking and precise coordination. When a small aircraft made an emergency landing on the nearby highway after engine failure, Tommy had provided ground guidance and emergency coordination with professionalism that impressed paramedics and air traffic controllers. His knowledge of aircraft systems, emergency procedures, and communication protocols demonstrated training that went far beyond basic first aid or Good Samaritan instincts. The pilot later told investigators that Tommy's voice guidance had probably saved his life, using terminology and decision-making processes that suggested extensive flight experience. Financial records, had anyone bothered to examine them closely, would have revealed spending patterns that didn't quite match a gas station attendant's salary. Tommy's purchases included technical manuals, specialized tools, and electronic equipment that suggested hobbies or interests requiring significant expertise and financial resources. His subscription to professional aviation publications, procurement of meteorological data services, and maintenance of communications equipment pointed toward knowledge and connections that extended far beyond his apparent occupation. The desert itself seemed to respond differently to Tommy's presence, as if recognizing something that human observers missed. Local wildlife, particularly the birds that used the area's thermal patterns for navigation, showed flight behaviors around the station that suggested familiarity with aircraft operations. Their movements sometimes anticipated military flights minutes before the planes appeared. as if they'd learned to recognize electromagnetic signatures or sound patterns that preceded official air traffic. The truth lived in a climate-controlled bunker 60 feet beneath Desert Rose Station, accessible through a maintenance shaft hidden behind the station's walk-in cooler. The entrance required 3 different biometric scans and a numerical code that changed daily according to algorithms Tommy had memorized decades earlier. Descending into that underground facility was like stepping through time from the dusty simplicity of roadside America into the sophisticated heart of military aerospace technology. The main chamber housed a flight simulator that existed nowhere in official Air Force inventories. The cockpit was an exact replica of the SR-91 Aurora, a hypersonic reconnaissance aircraft that, according to public records, had never progressed beyond theoretical design phases. Every switch, display, and control surface matched specifications from classified development programs that most Pentagon officials knew nothing about. Tommy had built the simulator piece by piece over 12 years, sourcing components through channels that didn't officially exist and assembling them with precision that would have impressed the original manufacturers. The machine was fully functional, capable of replicating flight conditions at Mach 6 and altitudes where the atmosphere thinned to near-vacuum conditions. Surrounding the simulator were banks of computers that maintained real-time connections to global intelligence networks. Satellite feeds provided surveillance coverage of military installations, aircraft development facilities, and test ranges across 6 continents. Encrypted communication channels carried traffic from black operations, experimental flight programs, and special access projects that existed in the shadow world between official military branches and private defense contractors. The processing power required to handle this information flow would have rivaled major university research centers, all of it humming quietly beneath a gas station that most travelers considered barely worth a second glance. Colonel Thomas Phantom Reeves had earned his legendary status by flying aircraft that officially didn't exist on missions that were never supposed to happen. For 15 years, he'd been the Air Force's answer to impossible problems, the pilot they called when conventional aircraft couldn't reach the target and conventional tactics couldn't accomplish the mission. His specialty was penetrating airspace that enemy nations considered impenetrable, gathering intelligence from locations that satellites couldn't access, and delivering payloads to coordinates that existed only in the most classified targeting databases. The SR-91 Aurora had been his primary aircraft, a machine that pushed the boundaries of what atmospheric flight could achieve. At operational altitude, the Aurora flew on the edge of space, using scramjet propulsion to achieve speeds that made conventional interceptors irrelevant. The aircraft's stealth characteristics rendered it invisible to radar systems that cost enemy nations billions of dollars to develop, and its electronic warfare suite could disable air defense networks without firing a single weapon. Tommy had flown the Aurora through airspace controlled by nuclear-armed adversaries, photographed installations that enemies thought were beyond reconnaissance reach, and collected signals intelligence that prevented 3 separate international conflicts from escalating to nuclear exchange. His mission record read like science fiction translated into operational reality. Overflight of the Plesetsk Cosmodrome in Russia, photographing missile systems that Western intelligence agencies needed to understand. Penetration of Chinese airspace during the development of their anti-satellite weapons program, gathering data that allowed American space assets to implement defensive measures. High-altitude reconnaissance over North Korean nuclear facilities, providing targeting information that diplomatic negotiations could reference without revealing how the intelligence had been acquired. Each mission required flying faster and higher than any pilot in history, navigating through atmospheric conditions that turned aircraft into meteors and making split-second decisions at speeds where human reaction time approached its absolute limits. The Aurora program had been terminated officially in 2009. its existence denied by successive administrations, and its operational history classified at levels that prevented congressional oversight. But Tommy knew the real reason for the program's cancellation had nothing to do with budget constraints or strategic realignments. 3 Aurora aircraft had been built, and 2 had been destroyed in crashes that killed their pilots during missions that couldn't be acknowledged. Tommy had been the sole survivor, the only person who could fly the Aurora's complex systems under combat conditions, and his knowledge of the aircraft's capabilities made him either the most valuable asset in the Air Force inventory or the most dangerous security risk in American military history. The decision to disappear had been mutual, reached during classified discussions between Tommy and Air Force intelligence officials who understood that some secrets were too important to trust to normal security protocols. Tommy would retire from active duty, vanish into civilian life under a carefully constructed identity, and maintain his silence about operations that could destabilize international relations if they became public knowledge. In exchange, he would retain access to intelligence networks that allowed him to monitor global developments affecting American security interests, serving as an unofficial early warning system for threats that conventional intelligence might miss. His underground facility maintained constant surveillance of aerospace development programs in hostile nations, tracking technological advances that might threaten American air superiority. Chinese hypersonic weapon testing, Russian development of 6th-generation fighter aircraft, Iranian progress toward long-range missile capabilities, and North Korean experiments with submarine-launched ballistic systems all fell within his monitoring parameters. The intelligence he collected was transmitted through encrypted channels to analysts who never knew its source, appearing in briefing documents as data from technical collection methods that required no further explanation. The gas station above provided perfect cover for his continued operations. The location offered unobstructed views of military test flights from Edwards Air Force Base, Nellis Air Force Base, and the classified facilities at Area 51. Commercial satellite internet connections masked the massive data transfers required for his intelligence collection activities. The station's electrical system supported power requirements that would have attracted attention in residential areas but seemed reasonable for commercial operations in remote locations. Most importantly, the constant flow of travelers meant that his presence attracted no special notice from local residents, who might otherwise wonder about his activities. Emergency protocols built into his underground systems could sterilize all evidence of his operations within minutes if his security was compromised. Thermite charges would destroy the computer equipment, electromagnetic pulses would erase data storage systems, and controlled explosions would collapse the bunker's structure beyond any possibility of reconstruction. Tommy had never expected to use those protocols, but their existence allowed him to operate with the confidence that his secrets would remain protected, even if his carefully constructed civilian identity was discovered. The convoy appeared on Tommy's surveillance screens 18 minutes before it reached Desert Rose Station. 3 black Escalades moving east on Interstate 15 with the precise spacing and coordinated speed that marked government operations. Tommy recognized the formation immediately from his underground monitoring station, watching their approach through cameras positioned along the highway that officially belonged to the California Department of Transportation, but fed data to networks that most state employees didn't know existed. The vehicles carried no visible markings, but their electromagnetic signatures matched patterns he'd been tracking for the past 72 hours. Ever since his automated systems had detected encrypted communications referencing his location. Using terminology that only a handful of people should have known, Tommy sealed his underground facility and ascended to the gas station floor, moving with practiced calm as he activated protocols he'd hoped never to use. Every screen went dark, every connection severed, leaving only the appearance of a simple roadside business run by a man who fixed engines and sold energy drinks to highway travelers. But his enhanced surveillance system continued operating on backup power, recording everything through cameras hidden in the station's weathered exterior, and transmitting data to secure servers that would preserve evidence regardless of what happened in the next few hours. The lead vehicle pulled up to pump number 2 with mechanical precision, followed by the other 2 Escalades taking positions that provided overlapping fields of fire and multiple escape routes. 6 men stepped out in perfect synchronization, their movements displaying the controlled discipline of special operations personnel, attempting to appear like civilian government employees. Their suits were expensive but practical, cut to conceal body armor and weapons while allowing rapid movement. The leader, a man in his 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to command authority, surveyed the gas station with eyes that missed nothing important and cataloged everything potentially useful. Tommy continued checking the oil in Mrs. Patterson's Buick, his hands steady despite recognizing several faces from classified briefings he'd attended during his final months of active duty. The man approaching him was Colonel Marcus Sterling, Air Force Special Investigations, someone Tommy had worked with during joint operations that existed in files so classified that acknowledging their existence would require congressional notification. Sterling's presence meant this wasn't a routine security check or administrative inquiry. This was something that threatened operational security at levels that demanded immediate and decisive action. Thomas Reeves, Sterling said, not making it a question. His voice carried the authority of someone who'd never been told no by anyone below flag officer rank. We need to discuss some irregularities in communication patterns that have been traced to this location. Tommy straightened up from the Buick's engine compartment, wiping his hands on a shop rag with deliberate casualness. I think you've got the wrong place, Colonel. This is just a gas station. We sell fuel, sodas, and lottery tickets. Nothing here that would interest Air Force investigations. Sterling's smile held no warmth, the expression of someone who possessed information that rendered denials irrelevant. Thomas Phantom Reeves, former commanding officer of classified aerospace operations, officially retired but maintaining unauthorized access to intelligence networks that pose significant security risks to ongoing national defense programs. The words hit like precision-guided munitions, each one calculated to destroy the carefully constructed fiction that had protected Tommy for 12 years. Sterling had done his homework, accessing files that should have been buried beyond any possibility of recovery. Someone with clearance levels that exceeded normal Air Force authority had authorized this operation. Someone who considered Tommy's continued existence a threat that outweighed his value as an intelligence asset. Tommy's expression remained neutral, but his mind was already running through contingency plans developed for exactly this scenario. His underground facility contained evidence that could expose black operations spanning 3 decades, intelligence that foreign adversaries would pay billions to acquire and domestic enemies would kill to suppress. The protocols he'd established weren't just about protecting his own identity, they were about safeguarding information that could determine whether America maintained its strategic advantages or found itself defenseless against emerging threats. I repair cars and pump gas, Tommy said quietly. Have been for over a decade. You're looking for someone who doesn't exist anymore. Sterling gestured toward one of his men, who approached carrying electronic detection equipment that began scanning the area around the gas pumps. The device immediately registered electromagnetic signatures that indicated sophisticated communication systems, operating far beyond the capabilities of standard commercial equipment. Another team member was checking the station's electrical consumption records through handheld access to utility company databases, discovering power usage patterns that suggested equipment loads inconsistent with normal gas station operations. Thing about signals intelligence, Reeves, Sterling continued, is that it leaves signatures. Quantum encryption protocols, satellite uplink patterns, Data transmission volumes that match classified communication networks. Your little gas station has been generating more intelligence traffic than most military installations. Tommy felt the familiar weight of being hunted, the same sensation that had driven him to disappear from active duty when the Aurora program's termination had left him, possessing knowledge too dangerous for any individual to retain. But this time was different. This time he had something to protect beyond his own life intelligence archives that documented American aerospace capabilities and foreign threats in ways that could prevent future conflicts or ensure American defeat if they fell into hostile hands. Sterling pulled out a tablet displaying satellite imagery that showed Desert Rose Station from angles that revealed details invisible to ground-based observation. Heat signature analysis indicated underground installations. Electromagnetic mapping showed buried communication cables, and spectral analysis detected materials consistent with military-grade construction beneath the station's simple exterior. The evidence was overwhelming, technological proof that Tommy's cover identity had been thoroughly compromised. "We know about the Aurora program," Sterling said, his voice dropping to ensure their conversation remained private from any potential surveillance. "We know about the missions you flew, the intelligence you collected, and the operational records you maintained. What we need to understand is what you've been doing with that information for the past 12 years. The accusation hung in the desert air like smoke from burning fuel. Tommy realized that Sterling wasn't here to arrest him for security violations or unauthorized intelligence collection. He was here because someone suspected Tommy of selling classified information to foreign buyers, using his knowledge of black operations to profit from America's most closely guarded secrets. The investigation had been prompted by intelligence leaks that suggested former Aurora program personnel were involved in espionage activities that threatened current military capabilities. Tommy's hands remained steady as he replaced the Buick's oil cap, but his mind was calculating response options with the same precision he'd once used to navigate through enemy airspace at hypersonic speeds. Sterling's team was professional, well-equipped, and operating under authorization that probably came from the highest levels of government. They expected to find evidence of treason, and they were prepared to use whatever force was necessary to secure information that could affect national security for decades to come. Sterling activated his tablet, swiping through classified documents. That made Tommy's blood run cold with each revelation. The first image showed Dr. Sarah Chun, a former Lockheed Skunk Works engineer who'd been found dead in her Phoenix apartment 3 weeks earlier. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but the photograph revealed details that suggested a more sinister conclusion. Sarah had been one of the 3 civilian contractors who'd worked on Aurora's propulsion systems, possessing knowledge of scramjet technology that remained decades ahead of anything in public research programs. Dr. Chun died the same day someone accessed Aurora technical specifications through encrypted networks. Sterling continued, scrolling to communication intercepts that showed data transfers matching the exact time of Sarah's death. The access codes used were yours, Reeves. Codes that should have been deactivated when you officially retired, but apparently remained active for 12 years. Tommy recognized the trap being constructed around him with growing alarm. Someone had been using his credentials to access classified information, stealing technical data while ensuring the digital fingerprints led directly back to him. The real perpetrator understood intelligence networks well enough to manipulate authentication systems, making Tommy appear responsible for security breaches that could compromise American aerospace superiority for generations. The tablet displayed additional victims. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a former Aurora navigation system specialist, found dead in a Las Vegas hotel room under circumstances that suggested professional assassination. Captain Janet Walsh, the only other surviving Aurora test pilot, who died in a suspicious car accident outside Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Each death had been preceded by unauthorized access to classified databases using authentication credentials that traced back to Tommy's supposedly retired security clearances. 3 people who knew Aurora's operational capabilities, Sterling said, his voice carrying the weight of someone delivering an ultimatum. All dead within the past month. All killed after someone used your access codes to steal the information they'd helped develop. Information that's now being sold to foreign intelligence services at prices that could fund enemy military development for decades. Tommy felt the scope of the conspiracy becoming clear with sickening precision. Someone was systematically eliminating Aurora program personnel while framing him for their murders and the intelligence breaches that preceded each killing. Real perpetrator possessed insider knowledge of Air Force security protocols, access to classified personnel records, and the technical expertise required to manipulate authentication systems that were supposed to be impenetrable. Sterling scrolled to financial records showing bank accounts in Tommy's name containing deposits, totaling $47 million, funds that had been transferred from accounts linked to foreign intelligence services. The money trail was meticulously documented, creating evidence that portrayed Tommy as a traitor who'd been selling American aerospace secrets to hostile nations for over a decade. Each transaction coincided with specific intelligence breaches, building a case that would convince any jury of his guilt. The buyers include representatives from China's Ministry of State Security, Russia's SVR, and North Korea's Reconnaissance General Bureau, Sterling revealed, displaying photographs of meetings that showed figures transferring briefcases and electronic devices. Aurora's technical specifications would allow these nations to develop hypersonic aircraft capable of penetrating American air defenses. The intelligence you've allegedly sold could shift global military balance for the next 50 years. Tommy studied the fabricated evidence with growing understanding of how thoroughly he'd been set up for destruction. The real traitor had spent years building this frame, creating financial trails and communication records that would survive any investigation. More importantly, they'd chosen their timing perfectly, eliminating potential witnesses while ensuring Tommy would be blamed for both the murders and the intelligence sales that had motivated them. But Sterling's next revelation carried implications that extended far beyond Tommy's personal survival. The tablet displayed satellite imagery of Desert Rose Station taken just 48 hours earlier, showing heat signatures that indicated his underground facility remained active despite the supposed termination of his intelligence access. Ground-penetrating radar had revealed the bunker's exact dimensions, communication equipment capable of global reach, and computer systems that matched specifications for classified networks. Your surveillance operation here has been monitoring military installations worldwide, Sterling accused, showing data intercepts that revealed the scope of Tommy's intelligence collection activities. Chinese missile development, Russian aerospace programs, Iranian nuclear facilities, North Korean submarine construction. You've been gathering information that foreign buyers would pay billions to acquire. The accusation contained enough truth to be dangerous while missing the crucial context that would explain Tommy's real purpose. His monitoring activities were designed to protect American interests, providing early warning about threats that conventional intelligence might miss, but explaining that defense would require revealing operational details that could compromise ongoing security programs and endanger lives of personnel still working in classified positions. Sterling's expression hardened as he delivered the most devastating revelation. Yesterday morning, intelligence agencies detected communications between your facility and networks operated by foreign military services. Real-time data transfers. That included current American military positions, planned operations, and defensive capabilities. Information that could get American service members killed if it reaches enemy commanders. Tommy realized that the real traitor wasn't just selling historical intelligence about Aurora program capabilities. They were using his compromised credentials to access current military information, stealing operational details that could affect ongoing missions and active personnel. The scope of the betrayal extended to American forces currently deployed in hostile territories, soldiers and airmen whose lives depended on maintaining security around their positions and planned activities. The tablet showed intercepts of communication, traffic that appeared to originate from Tommy's underground facility, transmissions that contained grid coordinates of American military bases, deployment schedules for classified units, and technical specifications for current generation aircraft. The data was being transmitted to recipients in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran, providing America's adversaries with intelligence that could neutralize decades of strategic planning and technological development. Sterling leaned closer, his voice carrying the authority of someone delivering a final ultimatum. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, currently deployed with a reconnaissance unit in Syria. Lieutenant Colonel David Park, leading a special operations team in the South China Sea. Captain Jennifer Walsh, piloting surveillance missions over the Korean Peninsula. All of them are at risk because intelligence derived from your facility has been shared with hostile forces operating in their areas. The personal stakes became clear with devastating precision. These weren't anonymous military personnel whose lives hung in the balance. They were people Tommy had worked with, trained with, and served alongside during classified operations that had defined his career. Maria Santos had been his weapons systems operator during Aurora missions over North Korea. David Park had coordinated ground support for Tommy's reconnaissance flights over Iranian nuclear facilities. Jennifer Walsh was Janet Walsh's younger sister, following in the family tradition of military aviation service. Tommy's hands clenched involuntarily as he understood the true scope of what was happening. The real traitor wasn't just eliminating Aurora program veterans to cover their crimes. They were using Tommy's identity to endanger current military personnel, creating ongoing security breaches that could result in American casualties worldwide. Every minute that passed without exposing the real perpetrator increased the risk that good people would die because enemies possessed intelligence about their positions and planned operations. Sterling stepped back, signaling his team to begin deploying equipment that would secure the area for a detailed investigation. You have one opportunity to cooperate fully, provide complete access to your intelligence archives, and identify every foreign contact you've been working with. Refuse, and you'll be charged with treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder. Convictions that carry penalties up to and including execution. Tommy walked toward the gas station's service bay with deliberate calm, his movements carrying no hint of the calculations running through his mind at hypersonic speed. Sterling's team followed at a professional distance, their positioning suggesting they expected resistance but were prepared for any contingency. What they couldn't know was that Tommy had spent 12 years preparing for exactly this moment, developing countermeasures that would have impressed the same intelligence analysts who'd trained him decades earlier. The service bay's hydraulic lift concealed the first layer of Tommy's defensive systems. As he activated the mechanism to raise Mrs. Patterson's Buick, seemingly to complete routine maintenance, his fingers input a sequence that triggered protocols buried throughout desert Rose Station's infrastructure. Emergency power systems came online, communication networks switched to backup channels, and surveillance equipment began recording everything through cameras that Sterling's team hadn't detected during their preliminary reconnaissance. Tommy's underground facility received automated alerts indicating hostile presence and potential compromise, initiating data protection procedures that would preserve critical intelligence regardless of what happened above ground. Encryption protocols activated across multiple networks, ensuring that sensitive information remained secure even if his primary systems were captured. Most importantly, emergency communication channels opened to contacts who could validate his identity and confirm his loyalty to American interests. Sterling watched Tommy's movements with growing suspicion, recognizing efficiency that suggested familiarity with procedures more complex than automotive repair. The colonel gestured to his communications specialist, who began scanning for electronic signatures that might indicate hidden systems or emergency protocols. What they detected was electromagnetic activity consistent with sophisticated security measures, but the specific nature of the equipment remained unclear through their portable detection gear. Tommy accessed a computer terminal that appeared to be running standard inventory software for the gas station's operations. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, calling up databases that existed in the intersection between civilian commerce and classified intelligence networks. The screen displayed fuel delivery schedules and maintenance records, but Tommy was navigating through layers of security that protected information capable of affecting national policy decisions. "I've been monitoring the same intelligence networks you're investigating," Tommy said quietly, his words carefully chosen to provide information without revealing operational details that could compromise ongoing security programs. "Someone has been using my credentials to access classified systems, but I've been tracking their activities for the past 6 months. Sterling's expression shifted from accusation toward cautious interest as Tommy displayed communication logs showing unauthorized access attempts that preceded each Aurora program member's death. The data revealed patterns suggesting the real perpetrator possessed insider knowledge of Air Force security protocols and timing that indicated coordination with intelligence operations. Most significantly, the access attempts originated from locations that didn't match Tommy's presence at Desert Rose Station, the computer screen filled with evidence Tommy had been collecting. Documentation showing how his supposedly retired security clearances had been reactivated without his knowledge or authorization. Network analysis revealed that someone with administrative privileges had restored his authentication credentials, creating digital pathways that allowed the real traitor to operate while ensuring blame would fall on Tommy if their activities were discovered. Tommy pulled up satellite surveillance footage showing his own location during times when his credentials were being used to access classified databases. The timestamps proved he'd been at Desert Rose Station pumping gas and repairing vehicles while someone else was stealing Aurora technical specifications from secure military networks. The evidence was irrefutable, demonstrating that he couldn't have been physically present at the locations where the security breaches had occurred. Sterling studied the data with growing recognition that the investigation had been misdirected by carefully planted evidence. The financial records showing millions in foreign payments had been created using sophisticated identity theft techniques, establishing bank accounts that appeared legitimate while actually being controlled by the real perpetrator. Communication intercepts that seemed to show Tommy coordinating with foreign intelligence services were revealed as fabricated transmissions designed to create false evidence of treason. Who has the technical capability and security access to manipulate authentication systems at this level? Sterling asked, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications of what Tommy was revealing. Tommy scrolled through classified personnel records that he'd been monitoring since detecting the first unauthorized access to his credentials. The list included fewer than 20 individuals with the combination of technical expertise, security clearances, and operational knowledge required to execute such sophisticated deception. Each name represented someone trusted with America's most closely guarded aerospace secrets, making the betrayal even more devastating than simple espionage. The surveillance footage revealed the real perpetrator's mistake, a moment of carelessness that had exposed their identity during what they thought was a secure communication session. General Patricia Morrison, Deputy Director of Air Force Special Access Programs, appeared in a classified facility accessing Tommy's authentication credentials while believing her activities were unmonitored. Her position provided access to every aspect of Aurora program records and current aerospace development projects. Morrison had been one of Tommy's commanding officers during the Aurora program's final operational phase, someone who'd participated in decisions about his retirement and disappearance into civilian life. Her knowledge of his psychological profile, operational patterns, and security protocols made her the perfect candidate to frame him for crimes that would eliminate remaining Aurora witnesses while providing foreign buyers with intelligence worth billions of dollars. Sterling's team immediately began verification procedures, checking Tommy's evidence against classified databases that confirmed Morrison's access to the compromised authentication systems. Communication intercepts showed her coordinating with foreign intelligence services, receiving payments through offshore accounts that matched the timeframe of Aurora program members' deaths. Most damning of all, surveillance footage revealed her presence at locations where the murders had occurred, using travel schedules that coincided perfectly with each assassination. Tommy activated his facility's emergency communication protocols, establishing secure connections to intelligence analysts who could verify his claims and coordinate response to Morrison's ongoing espionage activities. The evidence he'd collected over 6 months of careful investigation provided prosecutors with everything needed to build cases that would survive legal challenges while protecting operational secrets that remained vital to national security. Real scope of Morrison's betrayal became clear as additional intelligence emerged from Tommy's surveillance networks. She'd been selling not just Aurora program specifications, but current military capabilities, planned operations, and defensive strategies that could affect American security for decades. Her position allowed access to aerospace development projects, stealth technology research, and hypersonic weapons programs that foreign adversaries were desperate to understand. Sterling's expression hardened as he realized how close Morrison had come to succeeding in her plan to eliminate all Aurora program survivors while escaping with enough classified intelligence to destabilize global military balance. Tommy's survival and his evidence collection had prevented a disaster that could have compromised American aerospace superiority and endangered military personnel worldwide. Tommy's fingers danced across multiple keyboards simultaneously, accessing surveillance networks that had been quietly monitoring Morrison's activities for months. The screens filled with real-time intelligence showing the general's current location at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, where she was conducting what appeared to be routine administrative meetings but was actually coordinating the final phase of her espionage operation. Tommy's hidden cameras had captured her entering a secure communication facility just 20 minutes earlier, preparing to transmit the complete Aurora technical database to foreign buyers who'd been waiting for this intelligence windfall. Sterling watched in fascination as Tommy demonstrated capabilities that officially didn't exist, manipulating military communication networks with an expertise that revealed the true scope of his post-retirement activities. The gas station attendant was transforming before his eyes into the legendary pilot whose reputation had become mythology within classified military circles. Every movement displayed precision calibrated to split-second timing, muscle memory. From cockpit operations where hesitation meant death and accuracy determined mission success, the main screen displayed Morrison's communication schedule, showing encrypted transmissions planned for the next 6 hours that would deliver Aurora specifications to intelligence services in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran. Each transmission was worth billions of dollars to recipients who could use the technology to develop hypersonic aircraft capable of neutralizing American air defenses. Tommy had been tracking these planned transfers through financial networks that Morrison thought were secure, building evidence that would stop the sales while exposing her complete network of foreign contacts. Tommy accessed the Peterson Air Force Base security system using authentication codes that technically shouldn't have existed but provided him with real-time surveillance of Morrison's activities. The cameras showed her in a classified briefing room with 3 individuals, whose facial recognition analysis identified them as foreign intelligence operatives, using diplomatic credentials to mask their true purposes. The meeting was proceeding exactly as Tommy's intelligence had predicted, with Morrison preparing to hand over technical specifications that could shift global military balance. Sterling's communications specialist established secure connections to Air Force Intelligence Headquarters, transmitting Tommy's evidence through channels that bypassed normal reporting procedures. The urgency was extreme because Morrison's position allowed her to monitor routine intelligence traffic, potentially alerting her to the investigation if standard protocols were followed. Tommy had anticipated this problem, creating communication pathways that operated outside official networks while maintaining security that would satisfy the most paranoid counterintelligence officers. The surveillance footage revealed Morrison's desperation as she accelerated her timeline, attempting to complete intelligence transfers before her activities could be detected and stopped. She'd moved up the planned transmission schedule by 12 hours, forcing Tommy to activate countermeasures. He'd hoped to deploy more gradually. His underground facility became a command center coordinating response to a national security crisis that most government officials didn't know was happening. Tommy began implementing electronic warfare techniques that he'd perfected during Aurora missions over hostile territory, using signal jamming and communication disruption to interfere with Morrison's planned data transfers. The attacks were precise and targeted, affecting only the specific networks that Morrison was using, while leaving normal base operations undisturbed. Sterling watched as civilian gas station equipment somehow generated electromagnetic interference, patterns that matched capabilities of the military's most advanced electronic warfare aircraft. Morrison's foreign contacts began experiencing technical difficulties that appeared random but were actually carefully orchestrated to prevent intelligence transfers while preserving evidence of their espionage activities. Tommy's electronic attacks created digital fingerprints that would help prosecutors build cases against every participant in the conspiracy, ensuring that Morrison's network could be completely dismantled rather than simply disrupted. The operation required coordination across multiple time zones and technical expertise that demonstrated why Tommy had been considered irreplaceable during his active duty career. The psychological warfare component of Tommy's strategy involved making Morrison believe her security had been compromised by routine counterintelligence operations rather than targeted investigation based on specific evidence. His electronic attacks followed patterns that suggested automated security systems rather than human intervention, encouraging Morrison to attempt increasingly desperate measures that would provide additional evidence of her guilt. Every action she took in response to the technical problems created more proof of her espionage activities. Sterling's team established communication with Air Force security personnel at Peterson, coordinating arrest procedures that would secure Morrison and her foreign contacts without alerting other potential conspirators who might be monitoring base communications. The operation required precise timing because Morrison's position allowed her to access emergency protocols that could destroy evidence or alert accomplices to the investigation. Tommy provided real-time intelligence about her movements and planned activities, ensuring that security forces could act before she realized the scope of the operation against her. Tommy's surveillance revealed that Morrison had prepared contingency plans for exactly this scenario, including escape routes and communication protocols that would allow her to disappear into networks operated by foreign intelligence services. She'd established offshore financial accounts, created false identity documents, and coordinated with extraction teams that could remove her from American territory within hours if her activities were discovered. The complexity of her preparation demonstrated that she'd been planning this betrayal for years, building systems that would allow her to profit from American aerospace secrets while avoiding prosecution. The financial networks that Tommy had been monitoring showed Morrison's foreign buyers becoming increasingly anxious as technical problems delayed their planned intelligence acquisition. Communication intercepts revealed growing tension between Morrison and her contacts, with foreign operatives threatening to withdraw their payments if the Aurora specifications weren't delivered within the next few hours. The pressure was forcing Morrison to take risks that would provide law enforcement with evidence needed to prosecute not just her, but the entire international conspiracy. Tommy activated the final phase of his counterstrike, using Morrison's own security protocols against her by triggering lockdown procedures that would trap her in the classified facility while preserving all evidence of her espionage activities. The lockdown appeared to be routine security exercise, but Tommy had timed it to occur just as Morrison was attempting to transmit the Aurora database to her foreign buyers. She would be caught in the act of treason with evidence that no legal defense could challenge. Sterling realized he was witnessing operational planning and execution that surpassed anything in his own special operations experience. Tommy was conducting a solo mission against a target who possessed extensive knowledge of Air Force security procedures, using techniques that combined electronic warfare, psychological operations, and intelligence collection in ways that official military doctrine hadn't anticipated. The gas station attendant was demonstrating why the Aurora program had produced pilots whose capabilities remained legendary decades after their supposed retirement. The trap Tommy had constructed over 6 months of careful planning began closing. With mechanical precision, as Morrison's secure communication session at Peterson Air Force Base encountered increasingly sophisticated interference. What appeared to be random technical malfunctions were actually coordinated electronic attacks that Tommy was orchestrating from his underground command center, using signal processing techniques that he'd perfected during Aurora missions, where electromagnetic warfare determined survival. Every keystroke Morrison attempted was being monitored, recorded, and selectively blocked to create maximum frustration while preserving evidence of her espionage activities. Tommy's screens displayed real-time analysis of Morrison's psychological state as she struggled with communication equipment that seemed to malfunction at precisely the worst moments. Her stress indicators, measured through biometric analysis of surveillance footage, showed escalating panic as she realized her carefully planned intelligence transfer was falling apart. The foreign operatives waiting for Aurora specifications were becoming increasingly impatient, sending encrypted messages that demanded immediate delivery of the technical data they'd paid millions to acquire. Sterling watched in amazement as Tommy demonstrated electronic warfare capabilities that exceeded anything in official Air Force inventories. The underground facility's computer systems were generating interference patterns that selectively targeted Morrison's communication equipment, while leaving Peterson Air Force Base's normal operations completely undisturbed. The precision required to achieve such surgical electronic attacks suggested technology that existed years ahead of publicly acknowledged military capabilities. Morrison's desperation became apparent as she abandoned standard security protocols and attempted to use emergency communication channels that were supposed to be reserved for national security crises. Tommy had anticipated this escalation, monitoring the emergency networks and preparing countermeasures that would turn Morrison's security violations into additional evidence of her guilt. Every unauthorized access to classified systems created digital fingerprints that would help prosecutors demonstrate the scope of her betrayal. The psychological pressure was forcing Morrison to make increasingly reckless decisions that exposed the full extent of her espionage network. Tommy's surveillance revealed her contacting backup operatives who'd been hidden within other military installations, attempting to coordinate alternative methods for delivering Aurora specifications to foreign buyers. Each contact provided intelligence about conspirators who'd remained undetected, allowing Tommy to map the complete structure of the spy ring that Morrison had been operating for years. Tommy activated predetermined responses to Morrison's escalating desperation, using her own security clearances against her through techniques that exploited vulnerabilities in authentication systems she'd helped design. His access to her digital footprints allowed him to predict her next moves with accuracy that bordered on precognition, positioning countermeasures that would neutralize each attempted workaround before she could implement it. The electronic chess match was being conducted at speeds that required computer assistance, but Tommy's understanding of Morrison's psychology gave him decisive advantages. The foreign intelligence operatives at Peterson began showing signs of suspicion as technical problems continued interfering with their planned intelligence acquisition. Surveillance footage revealed heated discussions between Morrison and her contacts, with body language analysis suggesting that trust was breaking down under pressure of repeated delays. Tommy recognized the opportunity to exploit divisions within the spy ring, using carefully timed communication disruptions to increase paranoia and encourage betrayals that would provide additional evidence. Morrison's final gambit involved attempting to physically remove classified materials from the secure facility, planning to deliver Aurora specifications through human couriers rather than electronic transmission. Tommy had anticipated this possibility, coordinating with Sterling's team to ensure that Air Force security personnel would intercept any attempt to remove classified documents from Peterson. The physical evidence of espionage would be irrefutable, providing prosecutors with proof that no legal defense could challenge. Tommy's electronic surveillance revealed Morrison accessing emergency destruction protocols that would eliminate evidence of her espionage activities if she realized the investigation was closing around her. The timing was critical because she retained administrative privileges that could wipe classified databases and destroy records that documented years of intelligence sales to foreign adversaries. Tommy needed to preserve this evidence while preventing Morrison from recognizing that her activities were being monitored in real time. The complexity of Tommy's operation required coordinating responses across multiple networks simultaneously, managing electronic warfare attacks, while maintaining surveillance operations and communicating with Sterling's team through secure channels. His underground facility's computer systems were processing data streams that would have challenged major intelligence agencies, analyzing patterns and predicting outcomes with precision that demonstrated why Aurora pilots had been considered irreplaceable strategic assets. Sterling's communications specialist established priority connections to FBI counterintelligence teams who would handle Morrison's arrest and prosecution, ensuring that evidence collected through Tommy's surveillance would be admissible in federal court. The legal requirements were complex because much of the intelligence had been gathered through methods that officially didn't exist, requiring careful preparation to present evidence without revealing capabilities that remained classified at the highest levels. Morrison's foreign contacts began implementing their own contingency plans as repeated communication failures suggested that their intelligence operation had been compromised. Surveillance showed them preparing to leave Peterson Air Force Base through diplomatic channels that would provide immunity from prosecution if they could reach foreign embassy vehicles waiting outside the installation. Tommy recognized that preventing their escape was crucial to dismantling the complete spy network rather than just capturing Morrison herself. The final phase of Tommy's trap involved triggering automated security responses that would lock down Peterson's classified facilities, while appearing to be routine counterintelligence procedures rather than targeted operations. Morrison would be isolated with her foreign contacts and incriminating evidence, unable to destroy records or communicate with other conspirators who might still be operating within military installations. The lockdown would preserve everything needed for prosecution while preventing the spy ring from implementing escape plans. Tommy's screens showed Morrison's growing realization that her situation was deteriorating beyond recovery, with technical problems escalating to system failures that prevented any communication with her foreign buyers or domestic accomplices. Her biometric indicators revealed panic approaching psychological breakdown as she understood that years of careful planning were collapsing around her. The pressure was forcing her into actions that would provide definitive proof of her guilt, while eliminating any possibility of claiming her activities were authorized or misunderstood. Sterling observed the culmination of an operation that demonstrated capabilities he'd never imagined possible from a single individual working with unofficial resources. Tommy had orchestrated electronic warfare, psychological operations, and intelligence collection with precision that surpassed anything in Sterling's special operations experience. The gas station attendant had revealed himself as a strategic asset, whose value to American security extended far beyond his legendary piloting skills. The lockdown at Peterson Air Force Base, activated with silent efficiency as Tommy's final command, triggered security protocols that sealed every classified facility on the installation. Morrison found herself trapped in the secure communication center with her 3 foreign contacts, surrounded by evidence that would destroy any possibility of claiming innocence or diplomatic immunity. The electronic locks engaged with mechanical finality, while automated systems began documenting everything within the restricted areas, using surveillance equipment that would preserve evidence for federal prosecutors. Sterling's secure communication device buzzed with priority messages from FBI counterintelligence teams who were coordinating Morrison's arrest with Air Force security personnel. The operation required precise timing because Morrison's administrative access could still trigger destruction sequences for classified databases if she realized the scope of the investigation closing around her. Tommy's intelligence provided real-time updates about her location and activities, ensuring that security forces could neutralize her capabilities before she could damage national security interests. Tommy's surveillance screens showed Morrison's psychological collapse, accelerating as she understood that every communication channel had been compromised and every escape route had been blocked. Her attempts to contact accomplices resulted in automated responses that suggested her messages were being intercepted and analyzed by counterintelligence systems. The foreign operatives were becoming increasingly agitated as they realized their diplomatic credentials wouldn't protect them from espionage charges supported by overwhelming evidence. The electronic warfare component of Tommy's operation entered its final phase as he systematically disabled Morrison's access to classified networks while preserving all records of her unauthorized activities. Each security clearance was revoked through automated procedures that appeared routine, but were actually coordinated responses to her espionage activities. The digital audit trail would show investigators exactly what information Morrison had accessed, when she'd transmitted it to foreign contacts, and how much money she'd received for each intelligence sale. Morrison's desperation reached critical levels as she attempted to activate emergency protocols that would have destroyed years of evidence, documenting her betrayal of American aerospace secrets. Tommy's countermeasures prevented each attempt while creating additional proof of her guilt, turning her own security knowledge against her in ways that demonstrated the complete failure of her espionage operation. Every action she took to escape accountability provided prosecutors with more evidence for treason charges that could result in execution. Sterling received confirmation that FBI teams had surrounded Peterson Air Force Base and were preparing to arrest Morrison along with her foreign accomplices. The coordination required delicate handling because diplomatic protocols had to be observed while ensuring that foreign intelligence operatives couldn't claim immunity for crimes committed on American military installations. Tommy's evidence would support charges that pierced any legal defenses the conspirators might attempt to construct. The financial networks that Tommy had been monitoring showed Morrison's foreign buyers realizing that their intelligence operation had been completely compromised. Bank accounts were being frozen, communication channels were under surveillance, and escape routes were being closed by law enforcement agencies that had been alerted to the conspiracy. The international scope of the investigation would result in arrests spanning multiple countries as intelligence services moved against networks that had been purchasing American aerospace secrets. Tommy's underground facility processed final data streams that would complete the intelligence picture for investigators seeking to understand the full scope of Morrison's betrayal. The evidence showed that she'd been selling not just Aurora program specifications, but current military capabilities, planned operations, and defensive strategies that could have affected American security for decades. Her position had provided access to aerospace development projects whose compromise could have eliminated America's technological advantages over hostile nations. Morrison's final attempt to escape accountability involved trying to claim that her activities were part of authorized counterintelligence operations designed to feed false information to foreign adversaries. Tommy's surveillance had anticipated this defense, documenting evidence that proved she'd transmitted accurate technical specifications rather than disinformation. The quality and precision of the intelligence she'd provided to foreign buyers demonstrated genuine espionage rather than approved deception operations. The arrest coordination reached its climax as FBI agents and Air Force security personnel moved simultaneously to secure Morrison and her foreign contacts. Tommy's real-time intelligence guided the operation, ensuring that evidence was preserved, while preventing any attempt to destroy records or harm personnel involved in the investigation. The precision of the timing reflected months of careful planning that had anticipated every possible contingency. Sterling watched through Tommy's surveillance feeds as Morrison was taken into custody, her expression showing the complete realization that her carefully constructed espionage operation had been thoroughly exposed and dismantled. The foreign operatives were arrested simultaneously, their diplomatic credentials proving worthless against evidence of espionage activities conducted on American military installations. The coordinated arrests would prevent any possibility of the spy ring regrouping or implementing alternative plans. Tommy's screens displayed confirmation messages from intelligence agencies worldwide as law enforcement moved against Morrison's network of foreign contacts and financial facilitators. Bank accounts containing millions in espionage payments were being seized, communication networks were being dismantled, and accomplices were being arrested in coordinated operations that spanned multiple time zones. The scope of the response demonstrated how thoroughly Tommy's investigation had mapped the complete conspiracy. The evidence preservation protocols that Tommy had implemented throughout the operation ensured that prosecutors would have access to documentation spanning years of Morrison's espionage activities. Digital forensics would be able to reconstruct every intelligence sale, every foreign contact, and every security breach that had compromised American aerospace capabilities. The legal case would be overwhelming, with evidence that could survive any challenge while protecting operational secrets that remained vital to national security. Morrison's network began collapsing as accomplices realized their activities had been exposed and their communications had been monitored for months. Secondary arrests were being conducted at military installations across the United States as investigators moved against conspirators who thought their involvement was undetectable. Tommy's patient surveillance had identified every participant in the spy ring, ensuring that the complete network could be dismantled rather than just its leadership. Sterling's final communications with FBI headquarters confirmed that the operation had succeeded beyond all expectations, with evidence sufficient to prosecute espionage charges against dozens of conspirators while recovering intelligence that could have compromised American military superiority for decades. Tommy's solitary investigation had prevented a catastrophe that could have shifted global military balance in favor of America's adversaries. The immediate crisis was ending, but Sterling realized that Tommy's demonstration of capabilities suggested resources and knowledge that extended far beyond the current investigation. The gas station attendant had revealed himself as a strategic asset whose continued operations could provide early warning about threats that conventional intelligence might miss. serving American interests in ways that official agencies couldn't replicate. 6 weeks after Morrison's arrest, Desert Rose Station looked exactly the same as it always had: weathered concrete walls, ancient gas pumps, and the endless desert stretching toward horizons that seemed to swallow secrets whole. But for Tommy Reeves, everything had changed in ways that would have been invisible to casual observers. The morning routine remained identical: unlocking the heavy doors at precisely 0530 hours, checking fluid levels on pumps that never seemed to age, and preparing coffee that tasted like it had been brewed with water, filtered through decades of desert dust and highway dreams. The congressional hearing had been conducted in closed session, with testimony that would remain classified for at least 50 years. Tommy had spent 3 days in Washington explaining his post-retirement activities to senators and representatives, who struggled to understand how a gas station attendant had detected and neutralized an espionage operation that had eluded official intelligence agencies for years. His underground facility had been officially designated as a private security installation, with federal recognition that granted him legal authority to continue monitoring activities that affected national security interests. Morrison's trial had resulted in convictions on 17 federal charges, including espionage, treason, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence that Tommy had collected proved overwhelming, with financial records, communication intercepts, and surveillance footage that documented every aspect of her betrayal. She'd been sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, while her foreign accomplices faced diplomatic expulsion and international arrest warrants that would prevent them from traveling freely for the remainder of their lives. The Aurora program veterans who'd survived Morrison's assassination campaign had been relocated to secure facilities with protection details that would ensure their safety, while their testimonies helped prosecutors build cases against remaining conspirators. Dr. Elizabeth Warren received a new identity and research position at a classified aerospace facility, where her knowledge of stealth technology could contribute to American military advantages. Captain Michael Rodriguez was assigned to Pentagon intelligence operations, where his analytical skills would help prevent future security breaches. Tommy's role in exposing the conspiracy had earned recognition from intelligence agencies that officially didn't acknowledge his existence. His underground facility received upgraded equipment and expanded communication access that allowed him to monitor global developments affecting American security interests with even greater precision than before. The gas station above provided perfect cover for activities that spanned continents and influenced policy decisions at the highest levels of government. Local residents noticed subtle changes in Tommy's daily routine without understanding their significance. His conversations with regular customers included references to current events that suggested access to information sources beyond standard news outlets. When discussing aviation topics with pilots who stopped for fuel, his comments revealed knowledge of technological developments that remained years ahead of public announcements. The station's radio equipment occasionally picked up transmissions that seemed more sophisticated than civilian emergency services, though Tommy explained them as routine maintenance communications. Sheriff Martinez from the county law enforcement office had begun stopping by Desert Rose Station more frequently, ostensibly for coffee and conversation, but actually to coordinate informal intelligence sharing about suspicious activities in the region. Tommy's surveillance capabilities provided early warning about drug trafficking, illegal border crossings, and potential terrorist activities that could affect local communities. The partnership operated outside official channels while ensuring that relevant information reached appropriate authorities when action was required. The underground facility had been expanded with additional computer systems and communication equipment that maintained connections to intelligence networks spanning 6 continents. Tommy's monitoring responsibilities now included tracking aerospace development programs in hostile nations, analyzing financial networks that might indicate foreign intelligence operations, and providing early warning about technological threats that could affect American military capabilities. His reports appeared in briefing documents without attribution, contributing to policy decisions that helped maintain American strategic advantages. Martha Sullivan, from the diner across the street, had become an unofficial liaison between Tommy and the broader community, helping identify travelers or residents who might pose security risks while maintaining the careful fiction that Desert Rose Station was simply a roadside business. Her network of local contacts provided intelligence about unusual activities that complemented Tommy's technical surveillance capabilities, creating a comprehensive monitoring system that protected both national security interests and community safety. The financial arrangements for Tommy's continued operations remained classified, but his gas station business had become surprisingly profitable through partnerships with government agencies that required discrete fuel supplies and maintenance services. Military contractors, intelligence personnel, and aerospace engineers found excuses to stop at Desert Rose Station when traveling through the region, creating revenue streams that supported his underground facility while maintaining cover stories that satisfied casual observation. Tommy's legend within classified military circles had grown beyond his Aurora program achievements to include his role in exposing Morrison's espionage network and preventing the compromise of current aerospace capabilities. Young pilots and intelligence analysts studied his techniques as examples of how individual initiative and technical expertise could achieve results that large organizations couldn't replicate. His methods were being incorporated into training programs that prepared personnel for unconventional threats and autonomous operations. The motorcycle hidden behind the station had been upgraded with communication equipment that allowed Tommy to maintain contact with his underground facility while conducting reconnaissance missions across the southwestern United States. His early morning rides through desert highways served dual purposes of personal recreation and intelligence collection, monitoring border activities and identifying potential threats that satellites couldn't detect from orbital altitudes. On a quiet Tuesday morning in October, exactly 1 year after Morrison's arrest, a young Air Force lieutenant pulled into Desert Rose Station driving a rental car with government plates. Her military bearing and nervous energy marked her as someone carrying classified information that required discreet handling. She approached the service counter where Tommy was reviewing inventory records that doubled as coded intelligence reports. "Excuse me," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "I was told you might be able to help with a technical problem I'm having. Something involving aircraft systems that aren't responding to normal diagnostic procedures." Tommy looked up from his paperwork, recognizing the particular combination of professionalism and concern that marked personnel involved in classified aerospace programs. Her identification badge showed clearance levels that granted access to experimental aircraft development, while her expression suggested she'd encountered problems that couldn't be solved through conventional channels. "That depends," Tommy replied, with the same careful neutrality he'd maintained for over a decade. "What kind of aircraft are we talking about? And what makes you think a gas station attendant could help with military hardware?" The lieutenant reached into her briefcase and produced a photograph that made Tommy's pulse quicken despite years of practice at controlling emotional responses. The image showed a sleek aircraft that combined design elements from the Aurora program with technological advances that pushed beyond anything he'd worked with during active duty. The craft represented the next generation of American aerospace capabilities, incorporating lessons learned from decades of stealth technology development. "Someone told me," she said quietly, "that if experimental aircraft ever started behaving in ways that defied conventional understanding, I should find a mechanic in Barstow who specialized in fixing things that weren't supposed to exist." Tommy smiled slightly, setting down his inventory clipboard and walking toward the service bay where tools waited that could diagnose problems, spanning from carburetors to quantum navigation systems. Because in the high desert of California, where legends became reality and reality exceeded imagination, some stories never really ended. They just found new chapters waiting to be written. The lieutenant's hands trembled slightly as she revealed the real reason for her visit. "The aircraft isn't just malfunctioning," she whispered. "It's evolving, learning. The AI systems are rewriting their own code, and we can't shut them down. 3 test pilots have refused to fly it, and our best engineers are calling it impossible." Tommy studied the photograph again, recognizing design elements that suggested the aircraft had been built using principles from his classified Aurora research. Someone had taken his work and pushed it into territories that challenged the boundaries between human technology and artificial intelligence. The implications were staggering and potentially catastrophic if the wrong people gained access to self-evolving aerospace technology. "How long before other nations realize what you've built?" Tommy asked. 6 months, maybe less. China's already asking questions about electromagnetic anomalies over Nevada. Russia's repositioning satellites to monitor our test ranges. And if this technology falls into hostile hands. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Tommy walked to his coffee maker, pouring 2 cups while his mind calculated response options, with the same precision he'd once used to navigate through enemy airspace. The gas station attendant was about to become something more than a legend. He was about to become America's last hope against a threat that could redefine global military balance. "Well," he said, handing her a cup of coffee and looking toward the desert where impossible aircraft waited for someone crazy enough to fly them. "I guess it's time for one more mission." What did you think of Tommy's incredible journey from gas station attendant to America's secret guardian? Have you ever wondered what other ordinary people might be hiding extraordinary secrets? Drop a comment below telling us about the most surprising person you've ever met. If you enjoyed this story of hidden heroes and classified courage, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. We've got more incredible tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Your support helps us bring you the most amazing stories from the shadows of history. What story should we tell next? Let us know in the comments.